Good evening. I'm your host, Karen Hudis. Welcome to the series on the network of global corporate control. Today's segment is pre-recorded. We're continuing our planning on the global currency reset to exchange fake paper currencies issued by the central bank members of the Bank for International Settlements. Thanks to DCTV, to Carmen Stanley, studio producer and director, to Maurice Jackson, who's on teleprompter, and Cruchet Starnes on audio, and Dolores Harris is our floor director. The day before taping our pre-recorded segment for the 17th of July, I learned that Facebook is no longer allowing members to share my posts. They are blocking people from sharing my information. This is only going to backfire along with everything else the Banking Cartel tries these days. It's going to make my information even more interesting if that were possible. For the newbies, we're in a watershed moment where we either make it in the transition to a kinder world or we all end up in World War III. The chances, though, are heavily in our favor. Over 90%. This number, 90%, comes from the National War College's power transition model. I can explain this model to you very simply because I'm following it. Japan does not want the United States military to surrender. Japan wants the United States military to honor its defense treaty. The same goes for Germany. So Japan and Germany are not going to allow the United States paper money to fall like paper money always does. Japan and Germany are going to make sure that the United States can access its monetary gold reserves so that the United States military can honor the United States defense treaties with them. I've made this point to Germany's and Japan's military attachés in Washington. As a matter of fact, I also forwarded the defense attachés my letter to the United States Electoral College about the bogus election of Donald Trump. He couldn't have been elected because the United States Constitution was not in effect, and so the Electoral College could not be duly convened either. I'll forward copies of these documents and answer any other questions you may have. You're probably interested in the documents contained in the teleprompter a year ago. While we're speaking of Japan, I'd like to show you some letters to Japan. I wondered whether this had anything to do with the abdication of Emperor Akihito. You can easily see progress. I started out a couple of months ago telling everyone that Donald Trump was not Commander-in-Chief of the United States, with nary a peep from Donald Trump. Last week, I read you my letters to the Adjutants General of the 50 states and reminded you how this resulted in the early retirement of the chair of the National Guard. I've stepped up my game. Now I've reported sighting advanced military aircraft flying very low over my neighborhood in Northwest Washington, together with many helicopters with blinking lights speeding across the skies. I reported that these were flybys and salutes to the Overseer Mandate Trustee of the Global Debt Facility, containing the United States monetary gold reserves and wealth of the rest of the world. I've distributed these statements widely. On the 1st of July, I tweeted, "The Air Force shows me flybys every time I walk out of my house." I tweeted this, and the U.S. military has not denied the truth of what I'm telling you now. And I'm showing you in the teleprompter how YouTube hides the statements that I make behind buttons. They hide my comments and the link to the teleprompter. This 3-year-old series hasn't just been about the corruption in the world's money, although that's been our focus. We've also talked about the cure for cancer and other health issues We've talked about history, love, how our brains think, energy, Auschwitz, cities buried underwater, whales, dolphins, and other cetaceans. The reason why we're able to reveal this hidden information is because we are stronger than the corruption. The gold that was collected in the 1930s, together with all of the gold that was collected over many years of colonial history, it's safe and it's owned by the global debt facility. Ferdinand Marcos, Jose Rizal's lawyer, gave to J.P. Morgan in their New York office a CCTV set to view the gold in 34 tunnels and the giant snakes mulling around. The amount of gold is much more than has been reported because the number of years that it's been mined are many more than the falsified history that's taught in the universities. I've told you that the oldest pyramid has been shown to be nearly 10,000 years old. The main question that people want me to answer is when we're going to actually start exchanging currencies. As I said previously, we're ultimately going to accomplish everything on our agenda, and that means we're going to wind down the banking cartel and end the corruption in the world's currencies by exchanging these currencies. The banking cartel is now attempting to prevent our discussing the immediate next steps and how we want to proceed. Instead, the banking cartel is trying to confuse us. A massive exchange like this has to proceed in a way that prevents economic disruption and unemployment. People will be changing jobs as the economies grow with the increased local employment and people leave the corrupt financial institutions. There are many decisions that need to be made by we the people, and for these decisions to be made correctly, people need to get up to speed and inform each other what's going on. I'm in the center of this transition, but the main work in the transition is accomplished by all of us as we interact. The banking cartel is slowing us down, that's all. The banking cartel is powerless to prevent the global currency reset because we have control of the world's wealth in the global debt facility. We are onto them, and we don't buy into their corruption, and the world's military powers, minus corrupt brass, don't buy into their corruption either. And there's a link that I'm showing you in the teleprompter. YouTube broke the link, and they hid my comment behind buttons. At the end of the teleprompter, I'm attaching a copy of what Jose Rizal signed when he deposited the world's wealth and created the World Bank to make sure humanity benefited from his gift of love. You can see from the screenshot how YouTube has broken the link to the document I'm showing at the end of the tweet. On the 4th of February, I responded to a question about whether Jose Rizal wasn't adoption but descended only from the Malays. And that was actually in 2016. And that's how I got a copy of the document that Jose Rizal used when he deposited the world's wealth with the World Bank and IMF. And this is what the letter that I got on the 4th of February 2016 to Karen Hudis. Dear Attorney Hudis, you may have some remarks at the attached document. Thanks. Regards, Lucas. The day before we taped today's segment, I had a discussion with people about starting the reset in one of the World Bank's member countries. In principle, it shouldn't be too difficult to keep track of the currency. Make sure we have accurate lists of the people living in that country, agree on the amount of currency out of gold that each person is entitled to exchange for paper currency, and send the people a certificate where the amount of currency that they're exchanging can be marked up. First, the people will exchange the currency issued by their central bank for currency issued by the mint of their country, and this currency will ultimately be exchanged for gold. That's currency out of gold. The best way to have the people in the countries hold accountable the people administering the exchange. These are questions that can be answered for each country. One difficulty is that we don't yet have reliable staff. We can hire this staff, and the Board of Executive Directors of the World Bank has already approved the administrative expenses. The issue is the banking cartel's security guards are still refusing to admit me to the World Bank's offices. Ousmane Diagana, the Vice President for Human Resources, who's not following the World Bank's articles, has already had his employment at the World Bank terminated. Do all the staff at headquarters need to be discharged until they follow the directives of the Board of Executive Directors and Board of Governors? These comments are meant as early discussion points. The important thing is that we are initially going to start the process. Ultimately, the lessons that we learn will be taken up as we proceed. I should also mention that the gremlins in my PC are very agitated by these statements, and it's difficult to remain on the same page that I'm writing this, and now I'm reading it. Help in exposing the persons, events, and organizations that are trying to take us towards the New World Order. They can't do that. Folks, please work your way through a document that I tweeted to find out what's real and what's fake. We are anchored in reality, and you're going to learn this sooner or later. Sooner is better. And then I'm showing you in the teleprompter a letter that I sent to Tokyo. And it was on the 19th of June in 2018 to Trond. Dear Trond, thank you for your email. My response is going to tell you where we're headed. That is, with 90 to 95% likelihood, as predicted by the United States National War College's power transition model. Our correspondence is being widely distributed. As expected, Susan Olbach, that's the name of the executive director representing Norway, and she hasn't denied that what I'm saying is the truth. The number of retweets is much larger than what you'll see in Twitter. That's why Twitter Analytics keeps on deleting my top followers, even though I noticed that Twitter Analytics put some Trump supporters back for some of the months after I pointed this out. The main support that I have is highly informal. You can imagine why this is so when you think about the logistics when a Marine Expeditionary Unit attacked the CIA's branch office in Langley, Virginia last November. The rest of the supporting documents are at the end of the teleprompter. I also put some links to documents that were retweeted yesterday. It's a snapshot of our discussion. We're all in this together, and we're proceeding peacefully. Mistakes will be made, but they'll also be corrected, and we'll learn from them. The main point is to own the process. As we proceed, the way that we know that we're on track is the way that we acknowledge openly what's wrong and discuss how to correct it. This is the thing that's been the most lacking in our current monetary system. How did I know what this monitorable indicator of the global currency reset should be? It's because I've lived in the current system and I know what made it hard to fix. It's important for me to repeat Will Rogers' advice so that people understand my role as overseer mandate trustee of the Global Debt Facility. I say that we're all in this together. I'm not about pulling rank. This is a job that I'm doing on behalf of all of us, and even though part of my job is to tell it like it is to the world's muckety-mucks, I understand that each and every person who's fed up with the banking cartel is just as good as anybody else. if you get to thinking you're a person of influence, try ordering somebody else's dog around. And that was what Will Rogers said. Svein Aas, on his last day in office in 2009, together with the rest of the World Bank's Board of Executive Directors, reinstated me. This is the teleprompter to the YouTube video you refer to in your email that you sent me today. Svein Aas was acting along with the rest of the board because he knew there was a coalition. This coalition is still there, and it's strengthening. Individuals will not act now unless they're assured that they're protected by the coalition, which is counting on the dominoes to keep on falling, as predicted by the National War College's power transition model that I mentioned in my first sentence. In other words, time has to pass for events to ripen. For example, this coalition has been protecting me. As you can imagine, this protection is also informal, and it also depends on my natural intuition. Whenever I drive anywhere, there are banking cartel stunt drivers that do really stupid things. Because I also have very strong intuition, so far I've managed to evade these stunts. If you're looking for someone to talk to, just form a small group of people who know you very well and follow the Global Currency Reset in my social media. There'll be other contacts, mostly informal, by word of mouth mainly. The internet is very corrupt. Think of corrupt search engines and browsers. Your group may also choose to fight corruption at a local level. Why local? Because of the banking cartel's gatekeepers. The more senior the gatekeeper, the easier it is for the banking cartel to keep them in place, until the dominoes finish falling. The dominoes are all falling, but it'll take its own time. Will this accelerate? This depends on how quickly the local currencies are introduced. You'll have to ask 20 or 30 people to get 3 in your group. These 3 people are naturally resistant to the mind control that the banking cartel is broadcasting. If you want to think of an analogy about how things are progressing, think of starting a fire when the wood is wet. The fire will ultimately ignite, but the wood has to dry out. We're drying out the banking cartel timber by acting on a local level, and also I'm continuing to fan the fire from the center. What's the ignition? All of us, and the world's wealth. The world's wealth remains in the global debt facility. As people continue to learn about reality, the wood also dries out. Our correspondence illustrates how I'm fanning the fire from the center. Oh, I'm being told that we have some extra time, so I'm going to just speak extemporaneously. It's a wonderful opportunity because, as you know, I am in the very center and I depend on hearing from all of you. I started out as a whistleblower at the World Bank, and I'm still in touch with many of these whistleblowers. They're from all the different countries of the world. This is not a local effort, this global currency reset. Each and every country is going to be doing things in their own way, and we're going to be learning from each other. And what I've learned in working on this, I've been working actually on the global currency reset for at least 20 years, if not longer. And in the beginning, I didn't know about how deep the corruption was. I kept figuring that each layer that I was working at, that was going to be the final thing. And it was kind of like going up in an elevator without knowing which floor was going to be the top floor. But I actually think that at this point in time, we don't, obviously we don't know everything, but we're learning an awful lot, and things keep circling back. So I'm pretty sure that we know a lot about how deep the corruption goes, and it's incredible. It's really incredible. Some people are so intimidated by the amount of corruption that they absolutely refuse to see it. But fortunately, there are enough people that are they would rather see what the reality is than live in the fictitious world, and so that's what's going on now. If you read some of the comments in YouTube after I post these segments, you'll see how many people are actually aware of how deep the corruption is. And we're simply going to be speaking with each other. And what you also find out if you read the comment section in YouTube is how many, I call them sock puppets. These are people who are not real people. They're just voices for the banking cartel. And this backfires whenever they make comments, because we can see that they're not real people, and so it makes our conversation very interesting to the rest of us, and you can find out from the comments of the sock puppet what the banking cartel's next agenda item is. So, for example, they like to talk about Bitcoin, but Bitcoin, this is not real currency. Real currency is precious metals, gold, and also in the local currencies, there are real goods and services that are being produced in these local areas, and the local currency is like a barter system for that, and it creates overnight full employment. So we actually have all of the tools that we need, and we're just going to be learning how to operate these tools. The banking cartel has gotten very upset because we're not paying very much attention to them at all. As soon as we can figure out if somebody is pretending that they're not an agent of the banking cartel, and they really are. And it's hard to tell for sure. So a few months ago, I think her name was Colleen Ferris. I thought she was a sock puppet, and she took offense at that. It turned out that she was a real person. And once she understood that I really wanted to hear from her, because I do want to hear from people, we all need to be working together on the global currency reset. Once she understood this, and that we're all in this together, yes, it was very heartwarming. One of the other groups that I've heard from, this is somebody that I'm calling Andy, and you've seen in the tweets how he's working with his group. These are people that are just learning. As you look around, you can see just how we need to work together and learn from each other, and then we will be in the real world as opposed to a fictitious world. When you turn on the television and you read the newspapers, you're just hearing about something that the owners of the newspapers want you to think is real. It's not real. And the politicians, as I've said, the governments are part of this, we call it the one company. They're not real governments. We have to use, get from the grassroots levels, we have to go back and we have to reconstitute our governments. And in the meantime, all of the world's militaries understand that their brass are corrupt and don't have the best interests of the people in their countries. So we're at peace, and we are all just taking it from here and learning from each other. That's all there is to it. And the other thing really is to recognize just how we are working together and how our thought processes think. Some of the people were asking me how I'm going to be disseminating all of this information, especially because, as you've seen, Facebook and the internet, they're rigged. They really are rigged. Some people are saying, well, we've got to prevent the internet from getting hijacked, but it's already been hijacked before. That's what it is. So we have to start relying on word of mouth, and that will work. But the other thing is that since we have something called the collective unconscious, and we're all interconnected, we all ultimately do know, and we're going to learn how to rely on this deeper knowledge. In the civilizations that preceded this civilization, people were much better at getting in touch with each other using this feature of our minds and our communication. We're going to have to go back and learn how to do this. One of the things that I just started reading this week was the ancient Taoist literature in China. Now, we're not going to be talking about the world's religions now, because this is a way of splitting us apart, keeping us apart, and getting us sidetracked. So I really don't want to go into this at great length. But I do want to say that some of the things that I noticed in that literature was how people do recognize that we are really we're all one group. I showed this in a video with something called murmuration. This is when swallows fly at sunset, and you'll see hundreds of thousands of swallows all swirling around. How can they all fly without crashing into each other? How do they do this? It's because they're really one system, and humanity is also one system. So although I'm not able to get all of the communication to you, I do know that since we're all one system and we're all in contact with each other, we're going to find a way to collaborate on the global currency reset, especially because we're talking about all of the world's wealth, which is there and it's intact. And if you want to convince yourself whether these assets really do exist, you just have to read to see how hard the groups have been working to steal them. And they haven't succeeded, have they? No, they have not, because the world's wealth is still in the global debt facility. The banking cartel can't manage to steal the world's wealth, despite everything they've continued to try. The banking cartel's greed also teaches people about reality. This analogy is imperfect because there's nothing that will burn up in the global currency reset. We're going to transform our world to a kinder place and assume our transcendent aspects. The corruption will end as the world's paper money is exchanged for local currencies and for gold in the global currency reset.